My name is Tracy Metz. I'm the host of the live talk show Stadsleven, City Life, about life in cities in general and Amsterdam in particular. Over half the world's population lives in cities now, so urban issues are urgent and relevant for all of us. On the website of Stadsleven, www.stadslevenamsterdam.nl, we have a series of video interviews with urban thinkers, including Richard Sennett, Yevgeny Morozov, and Enrique Peñalosa, the former mayor of Bogota in Colombia. Today I'm speaking with Saskia Sassen, sociologist and economist, about her new book called Expulsion, about how the global inequality is increasing at the same time as the amount of global cash is increasing. One of the tendencies that you describe in this book, Expulsion, is how there's a new kind of global housing market only for the super rich. And I think we saw some frightening examples in London recently, for example, with the building One Hyde Park, where one of the apartments was paid for in cash by an Oli billionaire from Kazakhstan who paid over £100 million for it in cash. Is this just a little icing on the cake that we don't need to worry about, or does this mean more than just those few very expensive apartments? This is something, as you mentioned, that Amsterdam is also worrying about as news filters down that some of the canal houses are being bought by Russians and Chinese.
Well, I think that what we're seeing at work in this is a new type of market. And it's referred to, in the business as the super prime market, super prime, right? And it establishes, basic minimum prices. It's a bit arbitrary. And in fact, the minimum prices that I show in that book are the official minimum prices. Yeah. But the actual prices now, you can't get anything in New York for 20 million, or 10 million. It's 80 million to 100 million. But, and in fact, that is a great research project that the Financial Times did, and I also helped in that. And it was just beginning to capture this emergent new market, but it also has properties that are cheaper than the 100 million that the Kazakhstan rich man or woman paid for. Now, here's my problem. It calls itself a market. But it's one of these matched markets. It's a coordinated market. So it only addresses, certain needs. To call it a market it's a kind of market, but it's a very special kind of market. Okay?
Calling it a market suggests that there's some form of regulation or self-regulation.
Exactly. And it's not clear. I mean, there is a respect of the law. Supposedly when salespeople are in that market, they are respecting the law. It's above water. It's clean. It's not a strange. But there was also an acquisition that happened in London that was by a recognized international criminal type. And that was something that slipped in between, of course. That is happening also. But the thing about this market is that it aspires to be a specialized market that is global and that operates within the law. So that is already something, I would say. The real issue is what you said at the start, which is there is such an amount of concentrated money at the top. It is looking desperately for ways to invest. And there isn't much left. The global financial system is not doing as well as it did. It's not as attractive as it used to be. So this notion of buying urban land, which in good cities, that will forever have value. There might be ups and downs, but it's at this time, I guess it looks safer than to put it in some kinds of the most speculative kinds of financial instruments. And the financial system is still making money, Let's not, but it is different, And the crisis has meant something to some of the investors. So I was absolutely, because we know about the land grabs, right? Rural land buying, mining, and all of that. That became a very powerful investment also during the crisis. And in 2006, the figures show that for a period of 6 months in 2006, which the financial system at that point knew the crisis was coming, but it was not a publicly announced crisis, as happened in 2008, right? Then the global crisis is announced, so to say. For a period of 6 months, the main buyers of land in sub-Saharan Africa were hedge funds, not because they wanted to be, farmers, because it was a good investment. So that is what put me on the track of what's happening with urban land. You see, because then I said, well, urban land is an even better investment. And then you begin to see also the escalation in this investment in cities. And as you said, Amsterdam, the rate of increase from one year to the next, it was one of the highest in the top 10 that I showed. It was like 234% increase from one year to the next.
In 1 year, amazing.
And that itself, who knows what, this is something that takes off in 2008. The data really start in 2008. And so escalate, what is next? You see, so some cities have already reached the top a bit. And you see new cities growing in terms of investment. If you look at the full list of the 100, some of the cities that are at the bottom in terms of total investment are the most rapidly growing. So this is a roving opportunity, if you want, or option for these investors. And as we know, many of the properties sit empty.
I was just going to ask, is this for, I have the impression that for many of the super rich who buy an apartment or a house, they have several to begin with, and they're not buying a house, they're buying an address, or they're making an investment with no emotional value or commitment.
Yeah, that is another issue that sort of feeds into this de-urbanizing of the city. We know that in Manhattan, there has been a lot of construction of these very slender high buildings. They call them pencil buildings, very chic and luxurious. And we have comments from some residents who will say, well, at night, I'm the only one in the elevator. And people who walk around, people like me who are trying to check out the situation, 1 or 2 lights on. Clearly for the developer who put down that building, this was not simply about making profit now. This is an investment that could be a fairly long-term investment. And at least you have a foothold on that property. And you expect that eventually demand will come, or something like that. But a lot of the buildings are standing empty, and a lot of apartments that were bought are actually barely used. In one of my pieces, maybe we can put it online, I show photographs taken by a brilliant and courageous photographer of The Guardian who went into these properties in parts of London, which are very grand. And they are, the neighbors, the rich British neighbors complain they would like more people, more city. They're not like Hollywood where they want it empty. No, not in London. And so the photos show in some of these properties, trees growing inside. So they're just sitting there. This is a particular property that we all know is owned by the Saudis. They have that foothold. If there is a revolution back in the homeland, hey, they have that mansion. It's a mansion. They have that mansion in London. Who knows what the reasoning is, right? But the thing is that it's a good idea. And some of these properties, of course, were bought in an earlier period. It was probably the need for an alternative palace, so to say, in case you were going to be thrown down. Now they are so entrenched, all these dictatorships, that I think they are less afraid than they were. That's an interesting point. The 60s and the 70s were very particular moments.
Thank you so much, Saskia Sassen, for this eloquent expose based on your new book, Expulsion, Uitstoting in the Dutch translation.
It's always a great pleasure, Tracy. It's wonderful to talk with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Saskia. Bye-bye.